On a freezing night in December 6, 2009, a young mother of two small children vanished without a trace. Her name was Susan Powell, a charismatic, devoted woman full of dreams. From that day on, a series of dark secrets, bizarre behavior, and unexpected deaths would turn her disappearance into one of the most disturbing cases in American history. What happened to Susan? And why, to this day, has no one been officially held accountable? Get ready. This story is full of twists, and the ending, I promise, will leave you breathless. Susan Cox was a sweet, smiling young woman who believed in the power of faith and the value of family. She was raised in a religious home and found purpose in Mormonism. When she met Joshua Powell in college, he seemed like the perfect match. Smart, kind, a man of principles. They fell in love and got married in 2001, surrounded by promises of eternal love and the dream of building a sacred home. But the smiles in the photos hid what would soon become a nightmare. Cracks in the marriage appeared early. Joshua was controlling, paranoid about money, and constantly frustrated with Susan. He forbade her from making decisions on her own, controlled her passwords, and dictated what she could wear. Susan, on the other hand, tried to save the marriage, believing that with patience and faith, he would change. But deep inside, fear was growing, and the sense that something wasn't right. When their sons, Charlie and Braden, were born, Susan poured herself into motherhood. She recorded every milestone, cared for them with love, and made home videos filled with warmth. But those same videos revealed a distant, cold Joshua, often irritable and indifferent to his wife and children. The home that once promised happiness now radiated tension and fear, silent but intense. At work, Susan confided in coworkers that she was afraid of Joshua. She said if anything happened to her, they should look at him first. No one took it seriously at the time, but those words would gain haunting weight years later. Susan had even written a secret will and locked it in a safe, stating that if she died unexpectedly, it would not be an accident. That smiling woman who seemed to have it all was, in truth, living in constant alert. In the LDS community, Susan was respected, but whispers about her marriage were growing. Joshua had distanced himself from the church, engaged in theological arguments, and alienated those around him. Susan tried to keep up appearances, even as she grew emotionally exhausted. The dream of an eternal union had become a prison, and no one could have imagined that this seemingly ordinary home would soon become the center of a chilling investigation. Sunday, December 6, 2009. It was a cold afternoon in West Valley City, Utah. A neighbor stopped by for a quick visit, saw the two boys playing, and noticed Susan making pancakes. Everything seemed normal, but something felt off. The neighbor left around 5 p.m. and from that moment on, no one would ever see Susan alive again. By the next day, her absence would become the starting point of a chilling mystery. On Monday morning, December 7, Susan's kids didn't show up to daycare, and Joshua didn't go to work. Family and co-workers grew worried. Calls went unanswered. By 9 a.m., the police were contacted. When officers entered the house, they found an unsettling scene. Susan's belongings, her purse, ID, and phone, were still there, and two fans were blowing over a damp spot on the couch. It felt like something terrible had happened. Hours later, Joshua finally appeared. He claimed he had taken the kids camping in the desert in the middle of the night during a snowstorm, and didn't know where Susan was. Police were immediately suspicious. Who takes young children on a last-minute camping trip in freezing weather on a Monday morning? The excuse was absurd, but without a body or solid evidence, Joshua couldn't be arrested. Not yet. In the days that followed, media attention exploded. Susan's family, desperate, pleaded for answers. Joshua, meanwhile, refused to help with the search. He avoided reporters, hired a lawyer, and seemed more concerned with his image than with his missing wife. Each interview made him look colder. While everyone else searched for Susan, he focused on managing how he was perceived, and to police, that was a huge red flag. What started as a missing person case was quickly turning into a criminal investigation. The Powell home became the center of rumors, theories, and growing suspicion. Something was deeply wrong, and everyone knew it. But where was Susan? And more importantly, why was Joshua trying so hard to look calm? In the days following Susan's disappearance, Joshua Powell became a puzzle that no one could quite figure out. While Susan's family organized tireless searches, he stayed out of sight, ignored phone calls, and showed a disturbing lack of emotion. There was no panic, no sorrow, just cold indifference. When asked about his wife, his answers were hollow, like he was speaking about a stranger, not the mother of his children. Only days after Susan vanished, Joshua rented a car and drove nearly 800 miles without explanation. When he returned it, the interior smelled strongly of cleaning chemicals, and a small blood stain was later found, confirmed to belong to Susan. When questioned about the trip, he gave conflicting stories. Every time he spoke, the version changed. Investigators knew he was hiding something serious. Another red flag. Joshua suddenly withdrew all of the couple's savings and began selling off items from the house. He even sold his children's toys. He disconnected the home phone and skipped scheduled interviews with police. Instead of cooperating, he lawyered up. Meanwhile, old videos of Susan showed a woman growing more withdrawn, living under a cloud of silent dread. She was vanishing long before she physically disappeared. Then came one of the most chilling moves. Joshua relocated to Washington State with his sons to live with his father, a man with a dark past. He left everything behind: the house, the furniture, even his job. The message was clear: he had no intention of coming back. It was as if he was erasing his connection to Susan, planning a new life without her. And all the while he showed no sign of guilt. To police, there was little doubt Joshua was their prime suspect. But without a body, without a murder weapon, without eyewitnesses, they couldn't make an arrest. All they could do was watch and hope that eventually he'd slip up. His silence wasn't empty, it was calculated. And with each passing day, the mystery grew darker and far more dangerous. As weeks passed, police decided to search the Powell home once more. What initially looked like an ordinary house began to reveal details that raised serious alarms. Beneath the carpet, investigators found small traces of blood. Lab results confirmed that some of it belonged to Susan. But there was another sample, from an unidentified male. The house was starting to speak. Inside Susan's private safe, detectives found something even more chilling: a handwritten will, where she expressed fear of her husband. She wrote clearly that if anything happened to her, Joshua should be held responsible. There were also videos Susan had recorded, almost like a prophecy, walking through the house, showing their belongings, describing emotional abuse. She said she no longer trusted Joshua. It was a silent scream for help. Another disturbing detail stood out. The fans found in the living room were pointed directly at the couch, which was still damp. It looked like someone had tried to clean something. Maybe blood? Joshua claimed it was justice, but forensics didn't buy that explanation. Everything pointed to a hurried cleanup, one that reeked of panic. The investigation revealed something else. Months before Susan vanished, Joshua had taken out a life insurance policy on her worth over $1 million. That raised even more red flags. Was this disappearance part of a long-planned scheme for money? With every new clue, the noose tightened. It was as if the evidence was shouting for justice. But the one crucial piece was still missing: Susan's body. For investigators, patience became a weapon. They knew they were dealing with someone who had planned every move, but who was slowly losing control. The evidence inside the home could no longer be ignored. The truth was hiding in stains, documents, and silence. And the one question echoing through every hallway was this: what really happened inside that house on that freezing December night? When Joshua moved to Washington with the kids, he went to live with his father, Stephen Powell. At first glance, he seemed like just a grandfather trying to help. But soon, a disturbing truth came to light. Stephen was obsessed with Susan, and that's not an exaggeration. He had hundreds of photos of her, including ones taken without her knowing, videos, notes, even strands of hair he claimed were hers. It was a deeply disturbing personal shrine. Susan had told friends while she was still alive that her father-in-law made her feel disgusted and constantly watched. He would leave her letters with inappropriate comments, secretly record her, and according to her, even tried to kiss her once. Joshua never defended her. On the contrary, he seemed to act like it was no big deal. When police discovered Stephen's collection, they realized they were dealing with something far darker than a simple missing person case. And it wasn't just Stephen. Joshua's brother, Michael, took to the internet to promote strange conspiracy theory. He claimed Susan had run off with another missing man, Stephen Kocher, to start a new life. This narrative, though absurd, gained its own website and was used to distract from the growing suspicion surrounding Joshua. It all felt like a performance, carefully planned to muddy the water. Police eventually searched Stephen's house and found something even worse: illegal pornography and hidden recordings of neighbors. He was arrested and convicted, but by then the damage was done. To investigators, it became painfully clear Susan had been surrounded by men who were manipulative, controlling, and dangerous. Whatever had happened to her, it was tangled in this web of obsession and perversion. Even after Stephen's arrest, Joshua remained free. His behavior became even more cold and withdrawn. The children, now under his full custody, became pieces in his psychological game. Susan's parents, the Cox family, fought in court to gain custody of the boys, fearing something much worse might happen. And the chilling part, everyone felt it coming. No one knew how or when, but something terrible was on the horizon. Over time, Susan's sons began to talk. At first, in broken phrases, then through drawings. Charlie, the older one, told his teacher that his mom had gone on the camping trip with them, but she didn't come back. Braden drew a picture showing a woman locked inside the trunk of a car. Were these real memories, or the confused imagination of traumatized children? Police couldn't treat it as hard evidence, but they also couldn't ignore it. Other clues began to surface. Investigators searched an abandoned mine in the Utah desert, a remote spot Joshua claimed he had visited with the boys. There were signs someone had been there recently. Cadaver dogs alerted on a specific area, but after days of digging, nothing was found. It was as if Susan had vanished into thin air, or perhaps been taken elsewhere by someone else. The mystery remained thick and suffocating. Detectives began to explore alternate possibilities. Could Susan have run away, as the Powell family claimed? Was she alive somewhere, escaping a life of abuse, or was someone else involved? Maybe an accomplice. The lack of conclusive evidence left room for multiple narratives. Suspicion loomed, but so did uncertainty. Were investigators focusing on the right suspect? Time was working against them. Leads were going cold. Evidence was fading. And yet, police instincts kept circling back to the same person, but without a body, a weapon, or a confession. Any accusation would be too fragile. Meanwhile, Joshua carefully shaped his public image. He painted Susan as unstable, overwhelmed with motherhood, and possibly someone who had simply walked away. But the public began to wonder, who was really telling the truth? On the surface, none of it made sense. But looking deeper, every detail seemed to form a chilling pattern. Joshua, Stephen, Michael, they all hovered around Susan's disappearance with strange behavior, contradictions, and secrecy. But the final piece was still missing, and that left one haunting question. What if everyone was looking at the wrong person? Sunday, February 5, 2012. The social worker supervising Joshua's visits with his sons Charlie and Braden arrived right on time. The boys ran to the door, excited to see their father. But as soon as they entered, something felt off. Joshua quickly pulled them inside and slammed the door shut. The social worker, stuck outside, was stunned. She knocked. She yelled. She called 911. But within minutes, everything changed. A massive explosion rocked the neighborhood. Flames engulfed the house almost instantly. By the time firefighters arrived, it was too late. Inside the wreckage, they found the bodies of Joshua and the children. The scene was devastating, not just because of the loss, but because of what was found: gasoline cans, a hatchet, and the sickening realization this had all been carefully planned. As investigators retraced Joshua's final steps, they discovered chilling details. He had sent farewell emails to family members, distributed his belongings, and even erased digital data right before the explosion. It was like he had decided to end the story on his own twisted terms. No note, no apology, just a final violent act, one that took away the chance for truth and justice. For the Cox family, the pain was unbearable. Losing Susan had been a deep wound. Now losing their grandsons in such a horrific way felt impossible to process. For many, this was the conclusion, but for detectives, it was a clear message. Joshua had something to hide, and as the investigation had closed in, he chose to end everything. But why? What truth was he so desperate to bury? Even after all this, the case remained officially unresolved. No body, no confession, no trial, and the question lingered. What exactly was Joshua trying to cover up with this final act? Was it guilt, despair, or something, or someone, even darker in the background? The answers may have gone up in smoke, but what was left behind was a deep wound and a justice system still waiting to close the case. On the surface, none of it made sense, but looking deeper, every detail seemed to form a chilling pattern. Joshua, Stephen, Michael, they all hovered around Susan's disappearance with strange behavior, contradictions, and secrecy, but the final piece was still missing, and that left one haunting question. What if everyone was looking at the wrong person? More than a decade has passed since Susan Powell disappeared. Despite all the evidence, all the signs, and the irreversible loss, her body was never found. In 2013, she was declared legally deceased. But for her family, that was never enough. They're still waiting, not for a piece of paper, but for the full truth, for the complete story, and maybe one final goodbye. The case sparked legal reforms in custody laws, raised public awareness about domestic abuse, and exposed the gaps in a system that failed to save two innocent boys. The Powell tragedy laid bare the quiet danger that can hide in everyday homes, the kind of danger that doesn't shout, it whispers, and slowly it destroys. Many still wonder, could this ending have been prevented? If Susan's warnings had been taken seriously, if the red flags hadn't been dismissed, would the outcome be different? But this story, like too many others, is a painful reminder that danger isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's disguised as routine, normalcy, even love. While the world moves on, Susan's story continues to echo in books, documentaries, podcasts, and in the eyes of every woman who once felt afraid but wasn't believed. Her memory lives on, and maybe one day, the full truth will finally come to light. Until then, we keep telling her story, so it's never forgotten. If this story moved you in any way, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps more people learn, reflect, and maybe prevent future tragedies. Thank you for watching. See you in the next case.